Hey everybody, welcome to the 638 Podcast, Episode 4, your place for TVs, movies, and more. Now today we're going to be today I'm joined by my two great friends, Shulman and Ben. How are you guys doing today?
Doing pretty good.
Oh, great.
Yeah, I'm just chilling in the queue, queue day, at week, 5? I don't know. But that's why that's why we're here on the podcast, having some fun. So, with that being said, today I have a great topic prepared for us that I know we're very passionate about.
Do tell.
Yes, very, very great part of our childhood. Let's talk about Nickelodeon. The rise, the fall, the good, the bad, our favorite shows, our not so favorite shows. We're just going to give a comprehensive review about Nickelodeon and how that impacted our childhood. Because what I will say is, I don't know about you guys, but for me, it felt like Nickelodeon, at least for a number of years in my childhood. Not my entire childhood, but definitely a number of years, it felt like Nickelodeon definitely had a leg above all the competition in regards to children entertainment. Or,
I definitely
yeah.
agree with that a lot. I think especially like in the earlier years of my childhood, I felt like Nick, put out the strongest content out there. Like there was always something cool on Nick compared to the other networks, and like those are the shows that like I'd always talk to my parents about, and they'd pretend to listen to me.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Now, I speaking of Nick in general, I want to throw this over to Ben. What sort of impact do you think Nick had, if any, on your childhood?
Um, Personally, I feel like I watched Nick for my entire childhood. And even when I was a young kid, or just from being around my older sister, like I saw all the shows that were before my time and continued to watch it when I was young. There are timeless classics that I'm sure that we'll discuss sometime today,
Mm-hmm.
and there are shows that we talk about very often and discuss, like when we're just hanging out or anything now. So I think it's had a major impact on me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I mean, even for like further, like not even just the shows, but like they had a hotel, they had cruises that you could go
Stayed at
on.
the hotel.
Yeah,
Did
but
you?
Yeah.
how was that
That's really
experience?
cool.
I did not get gooed during any of the shows. I was never chosen.
Damn, that sucks.
I did
Did you
stand
even go
under
to
the
the
big
hotel then if you didn't get slimed?
slime, my bad. But I did go in the water park, and they had the big bucket that like looks like it, but it just water on it. And I had water poured on me there, but that's about it.
Yeah, I will say I didn't go to the Nick Hotel, but I did. One summer, I begged my parents to go on the Nick cruise, and that was very, very, very fun. Honestly, one of the best memories of my childhood. They had the voice of SpongeBob on there, Tom Kenny, as well as the whole True Jackson VP cast on my ship,
Mhm.
and
Wow.
It was
So,
amazing.
did you get to meet all the cast?
Yep, there was a meet and greet for the cast, and we got slimed. Even though I don't,
That's
I
cool.
also
Who
don't.
was who was your favorite cast member that you got to meet there?
I mean, like honestly, like they just you're in a line and you kind of just take a picture. So there wasn't that much, but honestly, one of the main guy character for True Jackson VP, he was definitely like the most chill. He was just around the ship, like on the flow rider, like the entire time, and he was very, very casual and friendly. I don't remember who he was, but like, yeah, oh
That's
yeah.
cool.
Anyways, so segueing besides, I think what the general point I'm trying to make is like Nickelodeon was all encompassing. Like it was more than just the shows. Like all they branched off into hotels, they branched off into cruises, merchandise. They were definitely
The whole line.
on top of children's entertainment for a long, long time. Now, one of the reasons I think that they got to this rise of fame is because I don't know if you guys know this, but before LeBron, Dwayne Wade, and Chris Bosh came to Miami, Nickelodeon had a big three, and their big three, which I think were probably the three most popular cartoons for their time, were SpongeBob, Jimmy Neutron, and Fairly Odd Parents, and they all happened to be on Nickelodeon. Now, I don't know
Mhm.
exactly how I want to format this, but I definitely want to take a deeper dive into these three shows in particular. What or let's just start surface level. Why do you think these three shows were so popular? Let me throw it over to Shulman first.
So these three shows all hold a special place in my heart. SpongeBob, Jimmy Neutron, Fairly Odd Parents. I have a lot of memories, growing up and watching these shows and these experiences. I think that a big part for me was just like how relatable it all was. You know, for a show like Fairly Odd Parents, like you could picture yourself wishing that you had your own fairy godparent could like grant you wishes, or that you were smart enough to build all these crazy inventions like Jimmy, and you were just kind of doing wacky stuff with your friends like SpongeBob, and so you could really like see yourself like hanging out with these people. The worlds were all pretty interesting. Like Jimmy Neutron had a candy bar, for crying out loud. Like that's awesome. What kid wouldn't want to go to a candy bar?
Yeah. No, I definitely agree with that. I wanna throw it over to Ben. How do you
Yeah.
feel about the big three?
I'm going to start this off with a small story. So, when I was young, my sister and I, as any other kids our age, ate Danimals. And
Of
Danimals
course.
were delicious. And they had a sweepstakes for a Jimmy Neutron playground clubhouse hangout thing. And you can find the commercial on YouTube still if you look it up, Danimals Jimmy Neutron commercial. And my sister and I actually won the sweepstakes, and our parents didn't believe us, and they threw out the winning ticket, and we never got it.
Oof.
And yeah, that's a very sad memory because of how beloved that show is. So that's my transition.
Yeah, that's the
Mm.
worst. That's a whole
It
nother
was
thing.
awful. Think about that.
Yeah, like plus all these kids shows. I don't know why, but I felt like they all had sweepstakes and stuff that like obviously a kid like, you know, couldn't cash in on by themselves or have knowledge of. And I don't know. I looking back on that, it was a little sketchy how many like, you know, how these commercials like really tried to entice their kids to spend money. But I digress. Like, anyways, me personally with the big three, like I said, like these were the three shows I probably watched the most at a certain time. I don't know what to even say about these three. Like they were all different, but they all like captured my attention so well. Like SpongeBob, obviously, instant classic. I think it's still even running on Nickelodeon. And then Fairly Odd Parents. Butch Hartman just made a billion great shows all over
Yeah.
everywhere, and that was again like I feel like the fantasy aspect of wishing and the scope of that really made it a cool show. And then same with Jimmy Neutron. First off, the animation was very different and unique, and then the characters, Sheen and Carl especially, were very unforgettable. But what I will say is, I think what's really interesting about these big three is how big they were. SpongeBob lasted forever. Fairly Odd Parents lasted forever. But I feel like Jimmy Neutron didn't last as long. And I was wondering, why do you guys think that was? Where Jimmy Neutron felt like it ended while it was on top, when Fairly Odd Parents and SpongeBob, like, unfortunately, it seemed like they went a little too long.
Didn't that happen because of a new management? Well, do you know that? Wasn't
Um,
there a new cast, and that caused like Avatar, Danny Phantom, and some of those other shows to close up shop early?
so I'm not entirely sure. I remember doing some research about this not too long ago, but some of the information escapes me. I remember that they did have plans for one more season, at least one more season, and they were going to focus more on some of the other characters. The cool guy Nick was going to kind of be more of like a series regular and be featured a lot more, like his dynamic with the group. But I don't remember exactly why it ended up getting canceled and just not going on there. It might have been just the the direction the network wanted to go. They didn't really have any room for a show like Jimmy Neutron, which was, the way it was animated was probably like very expensive,
Right.
and they just wanted to go in a different direction, throw some new shows in there, and unfortunately, our dear friend Jimmy, just couldn't make it.
My dear friend Jimmy. Let me throw this to you guys. Out of the big
He was
three,
just a kid with a knack for adventure.
yeah. Out of the big three, I'm gonna put you both on the spot. Which one would you say was your favorite and why? I'm gonna make you guys defend yourselves right now. Who wants to go first?
I think I will, just to give you guys some more time to think. If I had to pick one, I think it would be the Fairly Odd Parents, because it just how creative they're able to get in that world is just ridiculous. Like there's so much like cool wishes and like anything you want could happen in that show. Whereas like
Mm-hmm.
Jimmy Neutron, like it was kind of out there, but it was also grounded a bit in that it was all like they tried to make it based off of science and all that stuff. But literally, like there was so much going on in the world of the Fairly Odd Parents that like if I could have been in any of those shows, like I would want to be in Fairly Odd Parents and have wishes. Like that's what I would want to do.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I definitely feel that. What do you think, Ben?
I mean, I agree with that, but if I had the intellect of Jimmy Neutron, you can't tell me that you wouldn't want to be him. Pretty much, you have like the power of the. I mean, it's the same thing as the Fairly Odd Parents, but I guess more grounded. Um, I don't know. I feel like I enjoyed that show more watching it. It would be more fun to me there.
Yeah. This is hard for me because like obviously I have fond memories of all three of these shows. I wasn't really, when I was 9 years old, I wasn't really ranking them back and forth with each other. But honestly, I kind of feel this like the OG first three SpongeBob seasons. Definitely, I love those. But I'm kind of on the Shulman boat where I really like the. I think Fairly Odd Parents was my favorite because of that magical quality it had, as well as just on top of that. Honestly, comparison to that would be kind of the feeling I got from Phineas and Ferb later on, where just anything could happen, and it was always like an adventure trying to see what's gonna happen today, like what crazy magical thing is gonna happen. I think that's one of the reasons why I really really liked Fairly Odd Parents.
Yeah. Another thing you mentioned right there about how like the first three seasons of SpongeBob were so good. I felt like I watched a lot more of SpongeBob like after it stopped like getting good than I did with Fairly Odd Parents. Like
Yeah.
I took a break from Fairly Odd Parents when it started to go downhill, and that kind of keeps like the purity of the earlier season
Mm-hmm.
and like how good the quality of the show was for me. Whereas SpongeBob, like I've seen a lot more bad episodes of SpongeBob, and not that like I don't like the show, it just leaves a little bit more of like a sour taste in my mouth or in my eyes, I guess.
Right. Um. Yeah. Definitely. So I think that pretty much sums up the big three. Like no matter what, they were definitely really really great overall, and those definitely helped solidify Nickelodeon's rise to the top.
Yeah, for sure.
Speaking of which, I actually wanna brings us to another topic wasn't as popular as the big three, but definitely in its time that it had on Nickelodeon was a very 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 popular series. I want to talk a little bit about Danny Phantom. Um, Me personally, I would say Danny Phantom was one of my favorite shows on Nickelodeon. I think I was in the 10, 11 year old range when it was at its peak. And, at that 10, 11 range, you kind of feel like you're a little bit older and whatever. And Danny Phantom felt a little older than Jimmy, Timmy, and I guess not SpongeBob because he had a full time job, but definitely felt like a step older with keeping with the cartoon tropes, and like everybody loves superheroes. Like this was before the superhero craze happened with Marvel and whatever. And I just thought it was a really 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 cool show. How'd you guys feel about Danny Phantom growing up?
Danny Phantom was like one of the best shows ever as a kid. Like it was so much fun. Like every episode, like all the ghosts were very creative. Like Danny had to fight. They were all like very different villains from like the typical villains that you'd see, and like everyone knows like the kind of crime fighting like the superheroes. They've got super strength or super speed, but like how cool like it was to be a ghost and have
Mm-hmm.
all those ghost powers was like really unique, especially like at the time, and it was always like interesting seeing what was going to happen next.
Yeah, how'd you feel about it, Danny Phantom, Ben?
I think it was very short lived. Um, with Shulman that it was very different, and I like that aspect about it. They took something like when you say ghosts, like you would assume spooky,
Mm-hmm.
and like made a ghost or made that whole theme uh, go, and it was something that was different and people like seeing because it was I thoroughly enjoyed it. Loved all the villains. I loved Vlad and the whole plot.
Yeah, and speaking to what you kind of alluded to earlier, like I definitely remember that. Danny Phantom definitely had an abrupt ending. I think it lasted 2 or 3 seasons, and it
I think
was
it was 3
Was it? What'd you say, Shulman?
I think it was 3 seasons.
Yeah,
They did have like an actual like series finale, but like getting up to that point was a little rushed.
yeah. That
It
was
felt
the. I do know that at that time during that they were switching management at Nick, and that's when they wanted to, like I guess the theory is when you're switching management, you want to bring your own little touch in when you're like a new boss. You don't want to just keep going with what has been working because obviously they hired you for a reason and they want you to change things. So even things that could have been like very successful, like Danny Phantom, I know at least from Butch Hartman has a video on this that was his reasoning for why it was cut. But as you guys said, like Danny Phantom was just a super cool show, had a super cool opening. I thought the characters were very interesting. It just felt like it felt slightly more mature, not super mature, but like slightly more mature to that tween age, and it really, really, really hit the mark. Any other words you guys want to talk about Danny Phantom, or should we move on?
uh, Box Ghost, best Ghost.
Box Ghost, yeah,
Box Ghost,
Howling Whale, best move, right?
the ghostly whale.
Ghostly
Ghostly
Whale.
Whale. Okay, that now I think that brings us to what Danny Phantom kind of got replaced for, at least if I'm remembering correctly on this Butch Hartman video. You guys could quote me, or you can correct me later. But um, after when Danny Phantom was canceled, this new show, that took a risk on that was not going to be episodic was this show called Avatar: The Last Airbender. That I don't know if you guys know anything about this show. It was very it didn't do well. Yeah. No, so Avatar, I think by a lot of people's standards, is regarded as one of the best Western cartoons ever made, if not, the best show on Nickelodeon, or at least definitely one of the top shows made on Nickelodeon. It had a lot of um, Eastern influenced Japanese anime style with a continuing story through a complete was it 3 seasons?
3 seasons.
A complete like 3 season story, overarching. Had a very unique sort of animation combined with really really cool art styling and amazing characters. Now I know we can all talk forever on Avatar, but I definitely want to get your guys' perspectives. Let me start with Ben about how you feel about Avatar and what else made it so good.
I think Avatar was so good because it many reasons. I think it appealed to both a younger audience and rewatchability for the older audience, for people our age now, or for people who were older at the time that it aired. And I think that they had a goal. They knew what they wanted to do with the show. They did it in 3 seasons or books. They ended it. They didn't want to overstay their welcome and nailed the entire purpose. If anyone hasn't seen Avatar, I heavily suggest it. I rewatched it just last year, and I watched Korra this year actually.
Yeah, for those of you that want to rewatch Avatar, I believe it's coming to Netflix sometime in May. I think it's the middle of May. I'm
Yeah,
definitely, yeah, I'm definitely planning on rewatching it as well, because I honestly haven't rewatched it in a long, long time. Now, Shulman, how do you feel about Avatar, and what do you think made it so good?
there's a lot that I feel about Avatar. I think part of what makes it so good is the the vision that they have for this universe and this world. Um, I've looked a lot into like the history of the show, And when they came to the creators like pitching the show, like they pitched the entire series at once. Like typically they kind of just pitch like the first episode or like the general consensus, but they pitched like most of like the key plot points. They had the whole show like charted out from beginning to end, like right away, and you can tell by like a lot of the early things that like happened some of the earlier seasons, get referenced like later, much later on, and you're really rewarded for going through this whole journey, and like what's going on. So I thought that was so cool. They take like all the action being based off like real martial arts was awesome, and there's just so much to dissect with the show. It's just so smart. It's so good.
Yeah, definitely. Just going off that, like, I definitely thought that was one of the really really cool aspects was having the elements, and I guess again you could say it's kind of like a superpower, and just the historical um, it got inspired by these martial arts that were based on real things. I thought that was a really really unique touch. Obviously, as a child, I didn't necessarily appreciate that. I just thought, oh, this is a cool plot. Has some really cool characters, and it really gathered my attention. Like Danny Phantom, I felt like Avatar, really appealed to that tween age, especially that was on Nickelodeon, where it kind of felt like as Nickelodeon progressed through this time, it tried to appeal to the demographic that was growing up. Like it felt like the demographic that was watching Nickelodeon was constantly growing up while it was in its peak, and the shows, at least some shows, attempted to reflect that. As later we got Danny Phantom, and then we got Avatar. I think that's a really really interesting trend. Um, but
Something
yeah,
really cool about Avatar is how like when you watch the first season, it starts off a lot more lighthearted, a lot more kid friendly. They're going on these different adventures, and then as the characters go through their time in each episode, they start to grow a little bit older, and they start to become a bit more serious as things go on. So it's kind of just like life in that way.
yeah. Any other words you have on Avatar, Ben?
Um, I said it earlier, but if you haven't watched it, I heavily suggest it. Suggested. Everyone here has nailed the purpose about the show, and it's an amazing show.
All right, now speaking of transitioning on Nick appealing to an older and older audience, let's talk a little bit about the Nick sitcoms that we've had throughout Nick's lifespan. So they've had quite their fair share of sitcoms. Some a lot more successful than others. Particularly, I feel like the far or not right when they started sitcoms, they weren't necessarily super popular, but like if you get past those first couple years, they had a bunch of good hits, and then it started to taper off a little bit. But just going off Nick's sitcoms, I think the first one that we want to talk about, or that I want to talk about, is Drake and Josh. Now, Drake and Josh was arguably one of Nick's biggest shows, along with, obviously they have the big three cartoons, but I would argue Drake and Josh, along with iCarly, but first let's talk about Drake and Josh, was one of their biggest in-person sitcom shows I think they had. I want to start with Ben. Why do you think Drake and Josh was so successful?
Um, I think that show and a few other shows ran in like a chain of some sorts of all that into the Amanda show, and then the actors and
Mm-hmm.
actresses from there went to Drake and Josh, and then iCarly, and then blah 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 blah. Um, I think going into the creation of the show, they already had good writers and actors and actresses that they knew would be good in a Nickelodeon show, and I think that when we watched it, we were probably younger um, than the characters, at least, because I feel like for most of the
Yeah.
shows that we'd watch when we were kids, there would be uh, kids or people our age as the characters. So I think it appealed more and had more longevity because of the I guess more mature, not even plot, but just because of the setting of the entire story, and everything was supposed to be lighthearted and funny, and I think it was a great show.
Yeah, for sure. How do you feel about it, Shulman?
I agree with that a lot. I think that Drake and Josh is hilarious. There's episodes I quote all the time. I always go and watch them. whenever they're on TV. Uh, I think one of the parts I like about it the most is how like different Drake and Josh are from each other. It showed that like,
Mm-hmm.
especially like the first couple episodes, they always fought a lot. Like earlier in the seasons, it was more about how like they were different and they had to learn to get along. But then like later on in the show, they were very different. They were still very different characters from each other, but it was more about them just like it doesn't matter that like I'm more nerdy, you're more like cool. Like we're brothers, we're friends, like we're there for each other, which I always thought was really cool.
Yeah, some might say that Step Brothers took some inspiration from Drake and Josh. No, but actually, like I think it's a very very interesting concept. Having these step brothers, which is very very relatable, especially during the mid 2000s, and they could be like they're literally opposite sides of the spectrum. But I think what Josh also alluded to is their character arcs developed throughout the show. It wasn't stagnant, which I think was very very benefited a lot of these good Nick shows is having dynamic characters. And as I said, like Drake was still always the cool guy. Josh was always the more dorky one. But they definitely like the lines definitely blurred in a lot of episodes. And some Drake seemed more human. He had his faults. He wasn't that smart. And Josh, definitely didn't. This wasn't necessarily an exact fact of the show, but he slimmed down in person. Like as a person, Josh Peck, the actor, slimmed down a lot, and I think that also helped develop his character, gain more confidence as the show progressed, which I thought was very, very interesting. Now, I want to put you guys on the spot here again. I want to talk about who is your guys' favorite character in Drake and Josh, and why. I can start. I'll give you guys some time to think. My favorite character, you hear me out, was Crazy Steve. Okay? Now,
Okay.
It's not just because my name's Steve, but it's that character I thought was just hilarious. Like every time he came on the screen, like especially as a kid, I was like I was just waiting. I was like, how long is it going to take before he blows up? What are they going to say to him that he's just going to blow up, and then what's he going to do? I just thought it was so funny. As, especially in that one movie, I don't remember exactly what movie it was, where like Crazy Steve just like went absolutely crazy and was like, I don't know what he had in his hand. He had like a shoe in his hand or something, and they had to like sing a lullaby to him. I thought that was so funny. Now,
That's funny.
yeah, I want to throw it over to you guys. Who's your guys' favorite character in Drake and Josh?
I think my favorite character has to be Helen. Helen was hilarious with her backstory with being like a famous like child actress, and I loved whenever we got to see like her relationship, because even though like Josh is supposed to be the one that like adults kind of like more because he's more like mature, I guess. Like Helen loved Drake and like always gave him special treatment. And it was always fun trying to see like Josh try and like win her over. And I love the episode where Helen gets eye surgery,
Oh yeah,
and it was a classic episode. She gets eye surgery, and then Drake has like a party in her hot tub at her pool, and they're trying to like. She comes back, and they're trying to like pretend like all these people aren't in her house because she's blind. And I thought it was hilarious.
yeah. Who's your favorite character, Ben?
Um, may not be my favorite, but like at least like favorite to watch, or like I think like they have the best scenes is probably like Megan. Like everyone like hates Megan, but I feel like the humor that she like just like all the humor that she like brought to the show and like the antics on Drake and Josh, I just felt like it added so much to it, and I think it's hilarious.
Yeah. Speaking on to that, what Ben actually said earlier is having these characters be developed from other shows. Like as Ben said earlier, Drake and Josh were originally from the Amanda Show, which again I personally didn't watch the Amanda Show that much. I feel like that was slightly before my time, but in the same aspect, in the same vein, we had Megan be developed in Drake and Josh, and I know she wasn't necessarily the same character, but then they had her get her own show, iCarly, and that was another big hit. I would say Drake and Josh and iCarly were probably the two biggest sitcom hits they had. Now, why do you guys think iCarly was so successful? Because it was very very different than Drake and Josh.
I think part of what makes iCarly like so stand out a lot more is just like the whole concept of like this web show, especially like we're on a podcast right now, which is like a bit different than what they're doing, but like it was a idea that was like way ahead of its time, and it really like a lot of young people really like this idea of like using the internet and like showing what they're doing. Like it was like the whole vlog and YouTube scene before it really started to get big.
Mm-hmm.
And so now that it's like a big part of like everyday life, like seeing like iCarly's version of it is like really cool.
Yeah. How did you feel about iCarly, Ben?
I personally didn't watch it as much as say the other shows. But I did see a lot of the first season, I think, just from I don't know. Um I think it was a good show. I just think it was a little too techy and advanced and like a lot of that stuff. Like I don't know. I didn't like it as much as some other shows, but I still did enjoy it.
Yeah. I think I agree with Ben a little bit. Like I definitely watched a lot of the show, but I would 100% say I prefer Drake and Josh. But I do think Shulman also has a point, is that technology aspect was very, very interesting and futuristic before its time. And I think it embodied a lot of people's, fantasies about the internet and about getting famous and whatever. I think one of the reasons why maybe I didn't enjoy it as much, especially thinking as a kid, even though I did enjoy the show, don't get me wrong, is I feel like shows where I could, find a character and be like, oh, I want to be like that character. That character's so cool. I really, really like that character. I didn't really have that in iCarly because, well, I'm already blanking. Who's the main guy character in their show?
Freddie Benson.
Freddie, yes. Because Freddie, at least Freddie, no one wants to be Freddie. At least maybe at the end of the show you want to be Freddie, but like no guy watching that like wants to be Freddie. So then obviously I love Terry Traynor. Like I think he's awesome. Like I thought he was a cool character, but still, like as I said, on the main three that were going around, I didn't really find one that I could really empathize with too much.
Have you heard the conspiracy theory about who Freddie's father is?
No, what's the conspiracy theory?
So, for fans of the show, or for people who might not know the show as much, need to learn a bit about it. Freddie is he's kind of dweeby a little bit, and his mom is this very overprotective woman, and her last name is Benson. She's very controlling. The Benson family.
Barry B. Benson.
So it's from the B movie. Barry B. Benson?
Barry B. Benson from the B movie. And that she murdered the father accidentally. And so she's overprotective of her son because of that.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Also, most episodes, he's wearing shirts with stripes on it. He's got stripes.
Wow.
You
just opened my eyes Now just to touch on a couple others, like as Ben said, building actors, they had Zoey 101, which is obviously a big hit. Again, slightly before my time, I would say. Didn't really appeal to me as...
It's a fantastic show.
It's a great show. I did watch, but not as much. But the point I wanted to make is they took Victoria Justice from that show and then gave her own show, Victorious, which I wanted to talk about a little more because I feel like that was more in our peak time of watching these sitcoms.
Then there was Salmon Cat, which was with Victorious and iCarly actresses.
I didn't like Salmon Cat. That's when I was just like, all right.
I didn't watch it.
Yeah. But
I like the Salmon Cat, but I feel like they didn't really cross over like in any ways that I cared about with iCarly or Victorious.
Yeah, I feel like that started spelling the downfall of sitcoms on Nickelodeon. Was there any that we really forgot? I think there was one more that I had on the tip of my tongue.
My honorable mention is one on my top 10 list, but I will read that at the end of the podcast.
Oh, you know which one we almost forgot about Big Time Rush.
That is not what I was thinking.
How could you forget about Big Time Rush?
You gotta live it big time.
Nickelodeon sitcom, just four boys from Minnesota hanging out at the Palm Woods Hotel, being boys, making music, living the dream.
Yeah. Now, what I wanted to draw a parallel to Victorious and Big Time Rush. Thank you for reminding me, Shulman. I think what's interesting about those is, my guess is someone at Nickelodeon did some research and, like, guess what, guys? Like, let's not just do sitcoms. Let's do sitcoms and then let's add original music in there and then let's sell it on iTunes, right? And then let's make them big things and then let's do concerts. So I feel like Victorious and Big Time Rush, definitely
Naked Brothers Band.
Naked Brothers
Naked
Band
Brothers
too.
Band,
Yeah,
yeah.
they took that, let's make some music and then let's profit off that too. And I really, really enjoyed those shows. I was wondering your guys' thoughts. Let's start with Ben this time.
Um, I don't know where to start. Can I think for a little bit? Shulman, want to
Yeah,
take
sure.
this?
Let's see. Victorious. I honestly I never really got into that show too much. Like, I thought it was pretty neat, but I didn't really care for it all that much. I thought it was just all right. Like, I really liked a lot of some of the characters, but it felt like they focused a lot on Victoria Justice's character and Cat, and they didn't focus on any of the other characters.
Right.
I didn't really care about them.
I guess my question more so was, how do you feel about the idea of these sitcoms that also introduced I guess a musical aspect, you could say?
Yeah.
How'd you feel about that?
I thought it was fun. I didn't really care too much about the music. I wouldn't go off to buy it on iTunes. Back when that was a thing.
Not Big Time Rush or Boyfriend? You didn't buy that on iTunes like all of us?
Boyfriend.
Which I don't want to get
Great
copyright claimed, Ben. No.
Great song. I don't know. It was never something that I particularly like. I was more in it for the storyline of what
Okay.
was going on in those stories than let's listen to this cool music. So that was what got me more interested in the show, and so why I lean a bit more towards Big Time Rush, because I felt like they got involved in a lot more antics, and the songs always kind of had to do with what was going on, where Victorious's stuff was more we're gonna sing a song now, and they sing a song.
Right. Ben,
Um,
so how did you feel?
I didn't really get into Victorious either. It was just anytime I watched the show, it was my little sister watching it, and what I gathered from it, it was I'm complaining, but I'm the pretty popular girl, and then let's break out in song because we're all happy.
Yeah.
Which I can't argue that Time Rush isn't necessarily like that either, but I just felt like it was a little more grounded, and it was based in humor, which I don't think Victorious really was. I think that was more based in drama, or at least kids drama, and that may appeal to a younger audience, which is why I didn't like it. But yeah, I think Big Time Rush is a much better show overall.
Yeah, and I definitely, circling back real quick, I think that sums up a lot of the sitcoms on Nickelodeon. But I just wanted to really, really circle back because I totally forgot about this point. Back to the big three with Jimmy Neutron, Fairly OddParents, and SpongeBob. I just wanted to add another point on that is that they all had very, very entertaining and successful movies. Both Fairly OddParents movies.
Movies in theaters like the
Channel
other one.
Chasers.
That was a TV movie, not a theater
You
movie.
can't tell me
Yeah.
that Channel Chasers is not one of the best hours of television.
So obviously not all of them were in
that's not
theaters. Yeah, not all of them were in theaters, but they hyped up the movies on the channel and then they released them on the channel. And both Fairly OddParents movies, the Channel Chasers and the one with Mr. Crocker going back in time, both were amazing. The Jimmy Neutron movie, and initially that started off the show, and then they had one in the middle where it was a made for TV multiple episode movie where they had some sort of Survivor contest, was really, really cool. And then obviously the SpongeBob theatrical movie was amazing. How'd you feel about all those movies, Shulman?
I like them all. I have distinct memories of. I think one of my first times at the movie theater that I can remember was at a birthday party watching the Jimmy Neutron movie, and we rented out the whole theater, and we were just running up and down playing around, acting out the movie. I don't know how we were acting out the movie. None of us had seen it before, but somehow we knew what was going on, and we were all acting it out. It was a lot of fun. And the SpongeBob movie was a lot of fun too. But probably the best out of all of these movies are the Jimmy Timmy Power Hours.
Oh.
Most ambitious crossover ever. Don't
have it on
hold
DVD.
Marvel, but it was so much fun seeing the characters from both of those shows come together for a movie and interact.
Yeah, how'd you feel about all that banner? Like, what was your favorite movie?
It probably is the Power Hours or Channel Shade. Honestly, all of them. Love the SpongeBob movie. Like the first one a lot better than the second one for sure. Not even close. I
Mm.
like that. I like all of those movies. I don't know which one would be my favorite. And I'd have to think about it and rank them, but probably they're all so good.
Yeah, you don't have to rank them. I said yeah,
I
they were
love I love Channel Chasers. I love the SpongeBob movie. I love the Jimmy Timmy Power Hours.
honestly
All
Channel
of them.
Chasers probably a bigger reveal than Star Wars: The Empire Strikes Back. And don't at me Disney, as he doesn't want Marvel added. All right, moving on. Sorry, that was a little tangent, but I definitely wanted to make a note of those movies because I feel like they were really, really effective, and that also helped, make Nickelodeon very prominent. Is that not only do they have the shows, but they capitalized on these either in channel movies or even some theatrical movies, which helped them solidify their spot at the top. Now I want to get into a more free flowing section. I want to talk about everybody's personal favorites. If there either a show that we mentioned or a show that we didn't mention, if you have a personal favorite that you want to shout out. And then if you don't have a personal favorite, you can talk about some sleeper Nick shows that like maybe wasn't your personal favorite, but was a show we didn't mention that you wanted to give a big shout out to. I'll give you guys some time to think, and I'll just shout out I'll shout out some Nick Jr. shows real quick because we didn't really talk about Nick Jr. I think one of the reasons that Nick was able to capture our attention is because they had the best Nick Jr. shows. So I think Blue's Clues and Dora were the two that like my mom would just flick on, and it would be channel 60, channel 61, and I would just know, when I started transitioning into out of Nick Jr. into normal Nick, that I would just know to turn on channel 61 and I would be entertained because those two shows were very, very effective at capturing my attention from a young age. I want to toss it over. Let's start with Ben first. Any personal favorites or any sleeper picks that we have not talked about so far? What are they and
Can I
why?
can I go can I go over my top 10 list now?
You can go over your
I
top
think it's a
10
good
list,
time.
but definitely,
I'll just run through it. I'll just run through it.
go for it. I'll link Ben's top 10 list in the comments if you want to see it further because I know it's hard to hear.
Number 10. It is one of the most. It's the one I didn't know if anyone would know. Legend of the Hidden Temple. Mine is Rugrats, Fairly Odd Parents, Danny Phantom, Zoey 101, Panda Show, Drake and Josh, Jimmy Neutron, SpongeBob, Avatar. And then I have three honorable mentions. One of them is a sleeper that I want to talk about. And
Go
I
for
wasn't sure if it would count, but because you said Nick Jr., it definitely does count.
it.
Because it's Nick at Night. It's the George Lopez show.
Was that an exclusive? Like, was that only on?
I don't
Was
know.
that Nick at Night? That was Nick at Night.
The George
I
Lopez
know it was
show.
on Nick at Night.
You
but
cannot tell me that you have not spent endless hours just sitting watching the George Lopez show at 2 or 3 in the morning.
Yeah.
But like,
Nobody can deny that.
like real question was the George Lopez show like actually like only on at Nick at Night, or is it
I don't
like
know, but I watched the entire series strictly on Nick at Night
Yeah.
as a child.
I'm definitely with Bet on that. I'll count it because I definitely watched the George Lopez show strictly on Nick, even if it was running somewhere else. So that's a really funny honor. I'll give you the honorable mention. All right, I'll give you the clap. Like definitely when you're in that 13, 14-year-old phase, I feel like you start like you do homework late because I know Ben in my school in Shulman school ended at 4. Then you do your homework. Then by that point you're like 8. 9 o'clock, and then you finally flick on the cartoons that you used to watch as a kid, but now it's later and Nick at Night's on, and then you got the George Lopez show a lot of the time.
The George Lopez show, Full House, and Family Matters.
Yeah, Family Matters too. I didn't watch Full House that
Family
much.
Matters is fantastic. And then my other two honorable mentions were Naked Brothers Band and Big Time Rush. Those are
Oh,
all my sleepers, and that's my top 10.
all right. I'll throw it over to
13.
Shulman about any shows you want to shout out or talk about in more detail.
I got 3 shows I want to shout out and talk about a little bit. First is up is Chalk Zone.
Ooh.
Uh,
But
don't
wait,
remember-
just real quick, was Chalk Zone an exclusive to Nick? Because I've heard mixed things.
as far as I remember, like I only remember watching it on Nick as a kid.
Okay.
Like I don't know about
I think
that.
later, I will say, I think later, which I'm not 100% on this, so I could be wrong. I think the CW eventually got some rights to it because I think I remember seeing it sometimes on the CW, but definitely probably originated on Nick.
I think it originated on Nick. I just remember watching it there, and like that was cool. Kind of like Fairly Odd Parents, how like anything could happen because
Hmm.
like you could wish anything up. Like Chalk Zone, you could draw anything and make it happen. So I always thought that was cool. Um, Next one, I'm gotta shout out Invader Zim. Invader Zim is one of my favorite shows. It was so like weird and different than like everything else on TV. Like it was honestly like creepy, but in like a cool way. And they had a movie that came out last fall on Netflix, and that I was dying. It was so funny. I laughed all the time. And then number one shout out, sleeper pick to the Legend of Korra. We talked a little
Good
bit
show.
about last Airbender, but Korra, it was just as good in my opinion. I think its lows were a bit lower, but it rose just as high as Airbender did in terms of quality for some of that stuff. And the third season in particular of Legend of Korra is like so good.
Yeah.
And it's underrated because not enough people like gave it a shot. They watched the first season and they were like, like I miss Aang, I miss all that stuff. Where they watched second season, which was not very good, and like were turned off by it. But it's one of my favorites.
Yeah, I personally haven't watched Legend of Korra for kind of the reasons you said. It's kind of like the same thing where, as you guys, obviously, if you guys have heard of Naruto, but have you guys heard of Boruto? Like they tried to make after Naruto, they tried to make a series about his son, which some people that are actually watching the show say, hey, like it's actually pretty decent, but like a lot of people are just like, no, it's not. It's not Naruto. Like this is Boruto. This is not Naruto. Like it's not the same, even though it's in the same world.
Are you telling me that they made a show about Boruto's dad?
Okay, Shulman. All right. I wanna. Does anyone have any last thoughts on anything before we sort of wrap up? I know we talked a lot about a lot of different topics on Nickelodeon, but I just wanted to throw it to you guys if you have any last thoughts on anything.
No, I'm feeling pretty
Good
about it.
overall.
All right. Well, I want to thank you again, Shulman, and thank you, Ben, for coming on yet again. Um, Especially talking about Nickelodeon, and as I said, it was a very, very prominent part of our childhood. If you guys liked hearing this podcast, this is my sellout moment. You can subscribe to the channel on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, anywhere you can find a podcast. You type in 638 podcasts. You'll find us there. And just so you guys know, this is actually going to be eventually a 3-part series because there were 2 other very, very big cartoon / kid show channels in our childhood, and that was Cartoon Network and Disney Channel. So if you really, really liked hearing about Nickelodeon, when those other 2 release, I recommend subscribing and you'll get a notification when those release. Once again, thank you guys for coming on. I think this was a really, really fun discussion talking about these shows that I know I loved so much, and it definitely inspired me to rewatch Avatar when it comes out on Netflix later this month. And that concludes our show, and we'll catch you all next episode.